So this is a webinar called Create a Clean and Safe Shine, Real Solutions for Sticky and Slippery Floors. Great topic when you think about what you're doing with your work today, and not only doing a great job, but also making it safe as well. So we'll introduce our speakers in a moment, but you can see on your screen there, we have Russell Kenzior. He's the founder of the National Floor Safety Institute, and also Mike Sawchuk with Sawchuk Consulting. So two great experts who are going to share some of their expertise and also answer your questions. We have 4 sponsors as well: Americo, Bona, Gashium, and Tomi. So those are our 4 sponsors today. So as you probably know by now, I'm your moderator. I'm Jeff Cross. If we've never met, I look forward to seeing you at a future event, maybe the ISSA show in Chicago in October. Our webinar support is Martha Schmidt. She's the ISSA virtual events producer. She'll be the one advancing the slides and maybe backing some up depending how we go through this presentation today. So Martha is in charge of the entire platform. And then Kathleen Misovic is our CMM editor. She's going to be looking at the questions you're submitting and helping to organize those. So be sure as we go through this process that you add your questions as well. A little bit about CMM Magazine, Cleaning and Maintenance Management Magazine. It's the magazine for you, those that work in facilities, run cleaning companies, any part of cleaning that you're involved in. A lot of you might be in management, some of you might be frontline technicians, but whatever you do, this is the magazine for you, whether it's print, digital, you get the newsletters. You can go to cmmonline.com and sign up. We do have a daily news feed that comes out at 10 a.m. Eastern every morning, so be sure to get that as well. We want to serve you as your media provider. And just a few house cleaning points before we get started. Obviously, this is about you, so you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A portal. So if you put your questions in there, then Russ and Mike will be able to answer those, or they'll try to answer them. We'll see how that goes. So if you want to try to stump the speaker, feel free to put in your toughest questions there. This is a question that comes up all the time. Will I get a copy of this? Yes, you will. If you registered for this webinar, you will get a copy of this. It'll also be included in our CMM Daily News, probably next week. So be sure to sign up for CMM and get the magazine, get the digital or print version and the newsletter. You will get a copy of this. It'll also be on the website. No one needs to worry about their sound. You should be muted, except for our speakers. So feel free to make noise at your end. We won't hear you, but we will see your questions. So again, put them in the Q&A portal. I think that's about it for this slide. So when we think about how we're getting this webinar today, it's brought to you by our sponsors, and you can see them on every slide. So those are the ones bringing this to you today. And so we have 4 sponsor messages we're going to look at as we go through our presentation. So they're like commercials, they're peppered in here. So we thank you for staying with us as we go through this entire presentation. Tomi for their sponsorship and their message. Well, let's get right into it. Today's speakers, these are 2 gentlemen I work with all the time. We've done videos, articles. Mike Sawchuk with Sawchuk Consulting, he's up in Canada, and Russ Kenzior, the founder of the National Floor Safety Institute. He's down in Texas, where he tells me it's hot all the time. I don't know how true that is, but maybe he can speak to the weather later on this morning or this afternoon. But Mike is our first presenter. He's going to talk about something he's very familiar with. Let's go ahead and turn it over to you, Mike. And thank you again for your time today, Mike. Share with us what you know.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar. There's a lot of good information that Russ and I will be presenting, and I'm sure there's something for everyone that you could learn 1 or 2 new things. So sit back, relax, take it in, and then learn to apply or make sure you apply to drive those improvements in your cleaning operations. First of all, effective entrance matting system on each entry. It's important. Effective matting typically means 20 feet or so, and more is typically better. But the key is to have a quality system. And a system really is scraper, something that starts scraping the pebbles and the hard particulates off your soles of the shoes. And then something moves to scraper and then starts to dry the under soles, and then over to wiper. The other thing to consider is owning is typically better. You got better ROI on it, and you're going to have better effective system. Matting system all year round. You see, especially in Canada, put it out in the winter time, but it's not just winter for ice and snow. It does include all year round. It could be for sand or pebbles coming in from your outside the buildings, including rodent and bird droppings. In addition, the oils from asphalt and parking lots. So it should be all year round, all facilities, all entrances. You want to get some benefit, whatever you do now, if you're dust mopping, damp mopping, one time a day or twice a day, do one more. It drastically reduces the soil load that's on the finish, including any liquids that could lead to slipperiness. And the extra time it takes to do that, you're going to save big time if you could stretch out those scrub and recoat or the refinishing cycles. Edges first, detail the corners. Nothing detracts from a cleaning operation than seeing dirty corners, improper detailing. So do the details first, and you catch everything when you're doing the center of the floors. But the key to remember is make your floors look like they were done by someone who knows and someone who cares. Use effective and safe cleaning chemicals. There's a lot of good cleaning chemicals out there, custodial hardware, equipment. There's a lot of new stuff that's out there. Ensure you're investing the time and to have discussions and consider what's out there, test what's out there, and then adjust what you're doing in terms of your product procedures, protocols, and that's going to be work best for your type of soils, your type of substrates, your type of floor traffic, your type of people and their skills and abilities. But you need to be looking and testing in order to be constantly driving better. Moving on. Be sure to use the right dilution. That's critical. You want to ensure that it's not over diluted or undiluted. Either one of those things can cause issues. Let it cause too much film left on your finish, or let it be not cleaning effectively, which then gets pounded into the film. The next thing is make sure that you're using neutral pH. And that's critical. And Russ will talk a little bit later. pH, neutral pH, as we're talking, is different than neutral under traction. But a neutral pH for floors with finish, I've seen people trying to use something like a 10 or even 11. It's a great cleaner, but you're going to take the shine, you're going to skim strip that floor finish away, and you're going to end up why you need to do premature scrubbing and recoating. Now, when it says high quality neutral pH, there's a difference. Some of them are not much more than water, dye, and a fragrance. And so if you're paying not much more than water, you're likely not getting more than water. What you really want something from a neutral floor cleaner, something that's effective, that works great and quickly, and does not leave a residue that could lead to slip and falls issues. Typically, neutral floor cleaners, the higher the efficacy means that you've got a higher quality and quantity of a great surfactant that allows you to get deeper into the nooks and crannies and pushes that soils up for your mop or auto scrubber. Auto scrub or mop one more time. If you do that, even as the main traffic lanes, you are going to save and cost over the long run and have better looking floors. Moving on. If you are mopping, move to a dual bucket system. You want to ensure that you're cleaning, not polluting. Cleaning is a safe removal of those unwanted soils and disposing them safely and properly. Polluting is taking those soils and moving them around from urinal to urinal to urinal, from corner to corner, or from room to room because you're using dirty solution, dirty mop heads. It's a huge advancement moving from a single bucket to a dual bucket, and typically from a dual bucket to an auto scrubber. There are now good green certified strippers, finishes, sealers out there. If you're not using them, if you've got your token green certified cleaners and glass cleaners out there, look to move green certified product for the better safety of your employees as well as the occupants of the building. find them, test them, and ensure you get one that works for you. Moving on. Some pro tips. This goes without saying, hire people, the right people. And I emphasize, hire them for their attitude and traits, not their skills. If they got the right attitude and right traits, you could train them, you could educate them, you could coach them to develop the right skills. But if they don't have those right attitudes and traits, they are not going to be successful for you. So ensure, hire for attitudes and traits, not for skills and experience. Equipment, it's costly. And so make sure that the people are properly trained on them. And because it will actually drive down your overall repair costs, as well as causing damage to floors caused by improper use, as well as the uptime of the equipment. Shiny floors not necessarily mean clean floors. I've seen the shine because they got a lot of light on there, or natural or artificial. But if you just put your finger on it, you could get dust and grime. And what you really need to appreciate that when someone's walking, what's the pounds per square inch on a woman's stiletto heels, or on a man's heel coming down. So any soil that you may have on that top of that film will get pounded into the film, and that'll create premature uggling out, which you'll then have to scrub and recoat. Shiny floors can also have issues with dementia. And so as we talked earlier, you want to be sure you're cleaning, not polluting. So with that, you want to be covering your custodial closets. Nothing is worse than having dirty floors in a custodial closet. Because when you think of it, every day you pull out the cart, you pull out your auto scrubber, you pull out other pieces of equipment. What does it do? It takes whatever's on those floors in those custodial closets and then moves them throughout your whole facility. So that's a great source of transmission of pathogens. So ensure the wheels and the floors are well cleaned in the equipment and the closet itself. Last point on that slide, neutral pH. We talked a little bit about it. It's different than certified neutral traction products, and Russ will be covering that in his material. Moving on, please. Manage expectations, get them in writing, from all your stakeholders, your leadership, your team, your customers. Find out what they want, what they like, what they don't like, because don't assume. It's better to have it in writing, and then you could document what you're meeting and what you're not meeting, and what would be necessary to meet them. Digitize your process. If you're not moving to digital, do it very quickly. That's going to save you a lot of time and money moving forward, improve accuracy, and there's so much more benefit of it. Software, ensure that you're moving to look at some great software that's out there. Again, that's going to be able to reap a lot of rewards from having more available time to dedicate back into your cleaning. Focus on results. Take the time to measure, track, report, communicate on a regular and consistent basis, then analyze that information to see what can be changed or adjusted in terms of your product procedures, protocols, your training and education, and then to constantly drive the improvements. What you really want to do is drive those improvements in effectiveness, efficiency, productivity, overall lowering costs, so you get the highest levels of clean, healthy, and safe for their building occupants. Next, please. Floors, it's your largest reservoir of pathogens, period, in a facility. Dr. Gavin McGregor Skinner has recently wrote about it and spoke about it. There's a lot of great information on the ISSA and GBAC, and a lot of other credible experts have talked about the amount and the threat of pathogens on floors. So how does it get that way? Dr. Gavin has mentioned about, but people are coughing and sneezing. Gravity does what? Pulls it down. You've got small particulates in the air. What happens? Gravity pulls it down. So there's a lot of explanations on how it gets there. There's one study that showed in big box stores, soils from bathrooms were tracked 200 feet from those bathrooms. So it could be walked out of your bathroom facilities, or rodent bird droppings get walked into your facility. So there's many ways that soils are pathogens are on your floors. And with that, it'll have typically the highest pathogen load in your facility. Next question is, people say, Mike, I don't care. I don't touch the floor. And the answer is yes. People directly or indirectly touch the floor, typically 25 times a day. How, you may be wondering. You drop your pen, you pick up your pen. What have you done? You touch the floor. So you have a cord. If you aren't wearing gloves, you wrap the cord. It's touching your hands for the cord that was just on the floor, and it's on your hands or the person's hand who reaches out and shakes your hand sometimes throughout the day. Your floor, you walk on those floors, you go to your car, your floors are resting on your floor mat. Later on, you're going to drop something, you pick it up, whatever's on your floors is on your floor mat was now what you picked up. You go home, you take off your shoes, you improperly, you touch the bottoms of your soles, and then you end up from there touching yourself or your loved ones, and that is a transmission. And I bet you could think of a lot more ways. So if you want a healthy facility, be sure to provide healthy floors. The next point is, for that, you need to adjust your products, your disinfectants, your procedures, your frequencies as those threat levels change. So as they are going up, you want to be ramping up efficacies and frequencies. As they're going down, you want to be ramping them down. And you need to be doing all three dimensions, your air, your surface, and your subsurface. And that's critical if you want to help break and manage the transmission of pathogens in your facility. Next, please. Subsurfaces. We dealt with surfaces. Now we want to talk about the second dimension, which is really the subsurfaces. And we're going to deal with air at the very end. Subsurfaces are your drains. So it could be urinal drains, it could be your floor drains, it could be your slop sinks, your sinks in bathrooms. You got to understand that a lot of them have a high pathogen load right in those drains. So now when you dump more water from your auto scrubber, your bucket, or from the sink, there's going to be some things that become aerosol side, and you're now could be breathing it in, or as you're cleaning it, you're touching it. So you really want to be addressing your drains, your grout. Your grout is like a sponge. And if you're going into some areas with a light damp mopping, well, those liquids, the soils, let it be urine, it actually was flooded the floor, it soaked into the grout. You're not effectively dealing with grout with light damp moppings. And the worst part is you typically have cracks in your grout or cracks between the floor and your walls, and that any liquids, and in bathrooms, like you see it all the time, it could be urine, it'll actually go through that crack, and underneath your floor and above your subfloor is a puddle or a pond that you need to deal with. So if you want, it's critical to be dealing with your surfaces as well as your subsurfaces. Next slide, last slide, is indoor air quality. You're seeing a lot of it on in the different media right now, but it's important. You really can't be running a cleaning operation if you aren't addressing or looking at indoor air quality. And it does impact. You're selecting your type of chemicals. You know, do they have Green Guard certification, which is proven lower impact on indoor air effects? What type of equipment are you using? What kind of procedures are you using? There's all these decisions that could impact the quality of your indoor air. And indoor air does affect productivity, creativity. It adds illnesses like headaches, on and on. So there's a lot out there. I would encourage you to read the benefits of having high quality indoor air and what can be done to help improve it at your end. The last thing that I would suggest is get the monitors. A lot of people don't know how good or how bad their indoor air quality is. They have no evidence-based data. So start with the installation of monitors. They're inexpensive, and you get monitors for different things like particulate matter, CO2, total VOCs, ozone, humidity, which is important, et cetera. But it's important to install and track that data in real time if you're looking at trying to move from the minimum standards of indoor air quality to maximize it for the health and safety of your building occupants. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mike. Don't go anywhere, because we'll have the Q&A part shortly. And I know that's the most popular part of a webinar, when people get to ask the specific questions that affect them. So as we move on, we want to think about this. Let's move on to our next slide. We have a sponsor message to consider, and then something special for you.
The Bona Facility Solutions team offers products to renew hard surface floors. The Bona Commercial System Resilient Floor Solution promises quick, easy application along with durable, chemical-resistant, resilient floors. The Bona Commercial System Resilient Flooring Solution offers 7 base colors and 15 color chip combinations to allow floor owners to have unique, custom designs in their facilities. Our simple, efficient process can be done by in-house cleaning teams and building service contractors. Bona's flooring solution means you will never have to strip resilient floors again. The Bona Facility Solutions team is offering both in-person and virtual demonstrations to trained facility personnel, BSCs, and on-site cleaning teams on Bona's simple renewal process. Our resilient flooring solution offers floor owners reduced downtime, design possibilities, healthier surfaces, and energy savings. Reach out to a Bona Facility Solutions representative to learn about the best solution for your building.
So don't forget that we will take your questions. We're going to have time for your questions for our two panelists here shortly. And I will say we've got one question that Mike and Russ, I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it. So you might have to find those thinking caps here when we get to that question. It's a tough one, and it'll put you put your minds, will exercise your minds. So remember that, folks. Put your questions in. We'll answer the toughest ones as we get into that part. And we do have a chat question. What we want to do is set things up for Russ, who's going to talk about safety and slip and fall incidents. So give this a think as you watch this presentation, and just put your comments in the chat anytime. You don't have to do it right this minute, but think about this. Has anyone ever had a serious slip and fall incident on your floors? And has it ever involved litigation? Because if you've been through that, no doubt you're going to be paying close attention to the rest of this presentation. And if you haven't been through it, you want to avoid it. So give that some thought if you've ever had that incident, because Russ will be looking at what you say and maybe comment on that as well. I think we have one more sponsor message to consider.
Since 1969, Americo Manufacturing Company has been innovating high-quality, effective floor care products manufactured with pride in the USA. Headquartered in Ackworth, Georgia, we offer a full line of floor pads made from 100% recycled PET fiber and natural content. We combine American-made quality with tested sustainability technology, giving you the confidence that clean floors need not come at the cost of our environment. Visit our website to learn more about Americo's commitment to sustainability, green cleaning, and a cleaner way forward.
So thank Americo for their sponsorship as well. And as we move on, we will introduce Russ Kenzior. He's the founder of the National Floor Safety Institute, has some great information to share with everyone today. And as Russ talks, I'm going to put my own experience about slip and fall in the chat. I think you'll enjoy that. Well, maybe not enjoy, but maybe learn something from it. So Russ, take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. Everybody, I guess, has a personal story that they may or may not be comfortable in sharing about slips, trips, and falls. It's the leading health crisis, frankly, in the world, certainly North America. And I don't mean litigation matters, although that's a growing problem as well. But rather, if you look at this particular side, in the United States and Canada, slips, trips, and falls rank as the leading cause of accidental injury for individuals over the age of 65. That's also true across the world. So it seems to be that the more we age, the more likely we are to experience a slip, trip, and fall. And of course, the older we get, the more serious these types of injuries are. Many of you may not realize, how these injuries are taking place and really what's the ratio. And if you could, Martha, go to the next slide. This is kind of an example of how the National Safety Council, and this is published data from the National Safety Council out of their publication Injury Facts, which is actually a derivative from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. But how many of you would believe that accidental falls are the #1 leading cause of not only injury, but fatalities, death for the elderly? If you look down this scale, you'll see that falls are #1 for the elderly, motor vehicle injuries. You kind of keep going down the list and it becomes very, very small. In fact, if you add up all the categories under falls, they still don't take the same number of injuries that a slip and fall or a trip and fall would be revealed. So this is a very, very serious issue. It's one that will eventually, sadly, affect everybody listening to this webinar. It is the #1 health crisis in the country. It leads to an estimated 7 million emergency room visits in the United States. About 35,000 Americans will die each year as a result of an accidental fall. Next slide, Martha. This is kind of what's known as the slip and fall safety pyramid. This is kind of a good example of how many people actually get hurt and how many people actually die. And so for every person that dies as a result of a slip and fall, 23 people will fall and report an injury. That's an incident report. And 70 people, the majority, simply fall, get up, and go unreported. They're embarrassed. They're not seriously hurt, or they don't believe they are. And so they get up and you never know about it. What generally we do know are the injury claims, that middle section, and of course the fatalities, the top of that pyramid, most of which are the elderly. Okay, now when we talk about falls, this presentation is focused on same level slips, trips, and falls, not somebody falling off of a bridge or falling off of a ladder or even falling downstairs. That's a different category. We're here just to talk about same level slips, trips, and falls. And if you look at this pyramid, what I hope you all understand is the vast majority of people that are slipping and falling, you don't know about because they don't report it. And of those that you do know about, those that were reported, the ratio is almost 3 to 1. In other words, for every person that reports an injury, 3 people fell, but you don't know about it. Martha, next slide, please. This is probably the most popular downloaded item from the National Floor Safety Institute's website. And this is the graph that shows causation. And this deals just with slips and falls, not trips and falls. But the vast majority, in fact, 50% of all slips and falls are caused by the floor's condition, whether it be a slippery condition, whether there be some substance on the floor, contamination, film, or just simply water. But if you want to solve the slip and fall, your slip and fall problem, the biggest single piece of the pie is a walkway. Take control of your floors and good things will come. And by the way, if you don't take good care of your floors, bad things will happen as well. If you look at the remainder of the pie chart, these are things that oftentimes you cannot control. For example, footwear. 24% of slips and falls are directly caused by a person's shoes. For a good example, that would be flip-flops. Flip-flops are very, very popular, but very, very slippery. I work on a lot of matters involving litigation, and many of them, if not most, always seem to affect footwear by way of the person, the plaintiff, was wearing flip-flops. Now, you can't control the type of shoes people wear in your environment. You might control your shoes or your workers' shoes, but you can't control, for example, if you're a retailer, the type of shoes people walk into your retail store wearing. And by the way, many of them sell flip-flops. Fraud represents about 10% of slip and fall claims. It's a very, very small component and oftentimes very difficult to get a handle on. But when you hear in the media about slips and falls, it's almost always a story about fraud. What's important to note is fraud is a real problem, but it's not the biggest problem. The last 2 pieces of the pie break down into hazard identification and training. Do you post wet floor signs properly or not? Do you use hazard identification notices properly or not? And do you train your people in slip and fall prevention? Because that's a critical component. Everybody has to understand on your team what they can do, what their responsibility is to prevent accidental slips. Martha, the next slide. This is kind of an example of how traction, if you will, functions. You have a shoe and you have a floor. Both surfaces have a microscopic or rough texture. And as you walk across the floor, depending on, of course, the type of floor and shoe, you have this interaction between the bottom of the sole of the shoe and the top surface of the floor. The more traction you have, the greater the slip resistance is, and the more forgiving the floor is when it gets contaminated with such things as water. But as the surface of the floor wears smooth, or the shoe is worn smooth, or in the case of a flip-flop, which are kind of smooth right out of the box, this reaction between the bottom of the sole of the shoe and the floor becomes compromised as to make floors more slippery and to increase the likelihood that somebody's going to experience a slip and fall event. Next slide, Martha. This kind of gives an understanding of every time you mop the floor, the little pores, the microscopic pores of the floor you're maintaining gets filled in filled in with soil, contamination, the films being left behind by soap and minerals. And what happens over time, this polymerized film builds up as to create a wax-like surface. And then when you get water on it, it becomes very, very slippery. So part of the problem that we've seen at the NFSI is improper maintenance, where you're cleaning the floor over and over and over. And believe it or not, the floor is actually getting more slippery. Why? Because oftentimes cleaning products contain oil. Mike mentioned this earlier. Many floor cleaners are obviously water with dye and fragrance. Well, fragrances are oil-based. So every time you mop the floor and you're putting a fragrance on it, you're literally coating your floor with a thin layer of oil, and that builds up over time as to create a slippery condition. Next slide, please. This is kind of a microscopic profile, if you will, of what's taking place. Every floor, regardless of type, has a microscopic porosity. And if you were to look close enough, you see that these little pores in the floor get filled in with grease and oil or whatever contaminant. And then as you are cleaning the floor with a detergent or soap-based product, those products are designed to grab onto soil. But what happens is the soil inside the pores of the floor itself will bond with that chemical, the soap molecule, the detergent molecule, whereby the soap can't release. It can't grab the contaminant and pull it out of those pores. In fact, the opposite happens. The soil inside of those pores actually holds onto the soap film as to create this slippery condition. In fact, that's the definition of a soap film, is the soap molecule bonded to the floor by way of some chemical, whether it be an oil or whatever the contaminant might be, that's trapping it in. And you can't mop this off. In fact, the more you mop, the more soap film builds up, and this becomes a downward spiral. So it's important to use the right cleaning products and procedures to remove these, what are known as polymerized films. Martha, the next one. Here's ultimately the headache. You have property owners who are experiencing slip and fall claims. They oftentimes will go to their industry representative. They first reach out to the floor care industry, building service contractors, manufacturers, whoever, for help. As they fail in terms of their ability to help the property owner solve this otherwise complex problem, who comes into the picture but the insurance industry? And so now you have the property owner trying to solve a problem, the insurance industry who's paying for these claims, some of which become lawsuits. So then you have legal consequences. And then, of course, the biggest driver is medical costs. So as people get injured, seriously injured, that is more likely going to trigger a lawsuit that will certainly involve the insurance industry. Premiums will go up, and everything just kind of spirals down. But if you look at this nestling of events that are taking place here, it's a multi-industry problem. So my advice is get involved early, prevent slippage, prevent floors from becoming slippery. Because a floor that's not slippery doesn't result in a slip and fall injury, and therefore doesn't result in a slip and fall lawsuit. So everybody's a winner. But it's important that you do what you can to prevent these types of injuries on the maintenance side. Martha, the next slide. One way you can do that is by testing your floors. I don't know how many of you actually do this, but how would you know that the floors you're maintaining are safe? How do you know that you are creating a slip-resistant surface, which, by the way, is a requirement under pretty much every standard code and law? Well, you need to test the floor. And it's not hard to do. Back in the day when you needed to hire an engineer, somebody that came in with a technical degree and a lot of work, a lot of expense, well, those days are over. The device you see here is an example of one tribometer. That's a fancy term for a walkway slip resistance tester. This is the TrackScan 2. It's a very popular device. You put it on the floor, you press a button, it walks across the floor on its own, and it gives you an output. All testing is done under wet conditions per the NFSI standards, because wet floors create a hazardous condition far more than dry floors. It's not to say that people don't slip and fall on dry floors, but far less of them do. The TrackScan 2 puts out a paper printout. It also records the data internally. This is your data reservoir. This is how you can defend yourself in a litigation matter or defend your client in a litigation matter. But most importantly, this is how you know that as you're cleaning floors, you're making them safe. And if a floor becomes slippery for whatever reason, this is your early detection system. So this is the most cost-effective, simple, and frankly, strongest way that you can get engaged in preventing slips and falls, and that's by testing the floors you're maintaining. Next slide, Martha. Mike mentioned this a moment ago, and I'll cover this very briefly, but the NFSI B101.2 standard has been released several years ago, and this is a testing method that manufacturers of cleaning products, chemical floor cleaners, are using to measure whether or not the products they manufacture leave a slippery film behind or not. And so if you test the chemical cleaning product per the NFSI B101.2 method, you'll come up with 3 different traction ranges. And they're defined as traction enhancing, traction neutral, and traction reducing. And the way it works is a cleaning product that leaves a slippery film behind is what's known as traction reducing. It's making the floor more slippery. Floors that are tested to this standard that don't really change the slip resistance, or what's known as the coefficient of friction, are known as traction neutral. They're cleaning the floor, but they're not impacting the level of slip resistance. The third category is what's known as traction enhancing products. These are usually acid-based products or etchants, or provide some type of ability to make the surface rough. These are specialty products. These are generally not daily maintenance products. But if you find that the floors you're cleaning have a slippery film buildup, you need a traction enhancing chemical to remove that buildup. And so this standard has become very popular. Manufacturers across the world are now using it internally to develop chemical cleaning products as to not leave films. And the next slide, Martha. If you don't want to test and you don't have access to information about the slip resistance of a cleaning product, simply look for the NFSI certified label. I think there's over 600 or 700 products that have been NFSI certified, most of which are in the janitorial industry. If you want to see the entire list of NFSI certified products, simply go to the NFSI's website and you'll see, like I said, about 600 or 700 products. When you select products that are NFSI certified, you can rest assured that that chemical or cleaning product or auto scrubber or mopping system doesn't contribute to creating slips and falls. And so if you don't want to do testing, you don't want to get involved, simply go to your supplier, your distributor, and ask for NFSI certified products. That's your best bet that the products you're using are actually working in partnership with you and your clients to prevent slips and falls. And I think the last slide, Martha. There you go.
That was it. That was it, Russ. All right. Great presentation. And you both went so fast. We got lots of time for our Q&A part of our webinar. But our last sponsor message, let's play that. Then we'll get into our Q&A. So again, we thank our sponsors for making this webinar available to everyone. And now we have our Q&A part of our session. Mike and Russ, are you ready for some tough ones, or should we start with an easy one?
Tough ones.
What's that?
The tough ones first.
Tough one. Okay, I'm going to go with what I think is maybe the toughest one. And by the way, folks, if we can't answer any of these questions, then we'll have follow-up later. So we have copies of your questions, and both Russ and Mike can consider those later on, but they might know some of this stuff. So here we go. Curious to know if you have ever performed ATP swabbing on floors where an on-site generation chemical has been used on the surface, and what the difference was compared to a neutral cleaning chemical. I'm so glad I don't have that one to answer myself. What do you think?
I'll go first, Russ. The answer is yes, they've had that testing, but it goes back to that basic principle of cleaning results, and there's different acronyms for it, but I call the TACT principle. So it really isn't just the generation chemicals. They are good, they're effective on cleaning, but there's a lot of great typical, more traditional neutral floor cleaners. But what also impacts that is the agitation. So, you want to make sure that the pad pressure, if it's on an auto scrubber, are identical. The amount of time, how fast is that auto scrubber going through the floor? Is it a single, scrub and pick up, or is it like a dual scrub? Apply the liquid and scrub and come back a second time and apply and pick up. The time that it sits on the floor, also the chemical of use. Not all neutral floor cleaners are created equal. They'll have different. So really it's a function of your in this case, the ATP reading will be of the products being used, the procedures being used, the quality and quantity of training of the operator of that mop and bucket or the auto scrubber. But at the end of the day, I'm a big believer of there's a lot of good cleaners and the on-site generation products like an aqueous ozone. They are very good and have a lot of benefits, but so do some of the others. The key is to measure. That goes back and compare. You measure somehow, and ATP readings are great. Track that, report that, and then when you see an area of improvement, you say, okay, what can I do to change the education or training? What can I do to change the procedures, or change the frequency, or change the chemical itself? And keeping everything else equal. In this case, just say, okay, I'll use my traditional product, and then I'll use on-site generation, and so you get better results. But I've seen them good and I've seen them bad because it's more of impact is that there's the integration of all those components coming together.
Well, that sounded pretty good. Russ, anything to add to that?
Well, no, I think Mike summed it up. The importance is swabbing or testing for surface contamination, regardless of how it's generated, is important. Measuring slip resistance can also be an indicator of films, whether they be chemical or any other type of contaminant. So testing is important to be done, and benchmarking. I would add one thing to Mike's point is, if you're going to be doing ATP testing or coefficient of friction testing, keep track of what's going on over time, because what you're getting is just a snapshot. That at that particular location, at that particular time, you found whatever the swabbing revealed or whatever the COF testing revealed. But if you track that over time and location, it might reveal the source of contamination. And so being diligent and following through and keeping good records really makes a big difference in terms of testing.
Here's an easy one. It's real short, maybe to you, Russ. What age is elderly?
Boy, I feel it every day. According to the federal government, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, they're still ranking people over the age of 65 as elderly. But if you look at the data, as far as who's getting hurt more seriously, it's actually people over the age of 70. So the risk factor goes up over 60 to 65, but the injury frequency and severity becomes far more prevalent as we get older. And of course, people in their 80s are the most vulnerable and the most likely not only to fall, but the most likely to be seriously injured. To that point, Jeff, it's the leading cause of nursing home admissions is a fall, usually at home.
Yeah, it was a question and it's a good one. So thank you for answering that. Here's another one. How do you handle concerns or slip and fall incidents where they claim floors have too much grip?
Are they referring to a sticky floor when they say too much grip? Because that's oftentimes a bit of a misnomer. There are floors that are sticky and they feel like they have too much grip. And in fact, they do. But, we've seen in our research at the Institute that, for example, in medical facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, long-term facilities, they want floors that are not shiny or sticky, but also floors that can respond well to an injured person's restricted gait. As people get hurt or get older, they tend to shuffle their feet, they restrict their gait. And so a sticky floor can become just as dangerous is the slippery floor, because if it engages the bottom of the person's shoe prematurely in the gait cycle, they may stumble and fall forwards. In other words, sticky floors are more likely to result in a trip and fall or a stumble than a slip and fall, which is connected to slippery floors.
Okay. Mike, anything to add? We good with that?
I'm good with that.
All right. See, let's go to this one. It's kind of a general question, but it's one people probably ask. Maybe Mike, you could help with this. When you're looking for a good floor cleaner, what do you look for? What's considered a good floor cleaner?
There's a lot of things to consider, and it all depends on a person's objective or their priorities. First of all, you want it to be effective, and that's so it's got to work well. But one must recognize that a good cleaner working for a typical Russ's floor may not be a good cleaner for my type of floor, because maybe the type of floor is different, that substrate. Maybe the soil type and soil loads are different. Maybe the equipment we're using or the operator of the equipment is different. So it's important to test various products on your site, because just because it works well in one building or one area, it may not work well in the other. Saying that, you want it to be effective, and that is removes the soil, so you're cleaning up polluting. Number two, you want it to be, if you have a finish, you want it to be a neutral pH, so you're not skim stripping that finish off. And to Russ's point, you want it to be a traction that is not contributing to too much slipperiness or stickiness. So what I would look for is, number one, have it certified green. As you know, myself and there's other credible experts like Stephen Ashkin, to name one, we really promote the benefits of having something certified green. Because proven safer for people, that's users, the occupants, and the environment. So that's green certification through Green Seal, Eco Logo, or the U.S. Design for the Environment program. The second, if you want to layer that, if indoor air quality is really important, and it is growing in importance, I would say have it dual certified. You have it done with the greenness, and then have it for Green Guard, which is proven impact on indoor air quality. Tied to that is third certification is Russ on the traction impact, and have it certified by NFSI. And then lastly, for those that may be concerned about petroleum products, renewables, then you may want to consider having it also USDA biopreferred certified. So you could have a product that meets single or dual or triple or even quadruple certification. And I think what's important is the effectiveness of the product, but also then what's more important to you, slip and falls, indoor air quality, or the renewable resources.
Okay, good information. One question here, Mike didn't really address the use of disinfectants on floors. Should they be used, and if so, when? So Mike, do you want to start with that, or? Disinfection.
Sure. Typically, disinfectants are not required on floors unless you are doing cleaning in an operating room, a crime scene, where the pathogen type and load would dictate. And there could be certain areas in hospitals and long-term care. However, saying that, when conditions dictate, you may need to switch to all facilities and all floors. And the idea would be is if it's a pathogen, especially transmitted by touch. We heard from Dr. McGregor Skinner and other credible experts. The pathogen load on floors need to be dealt with. So you may want to say, given the communal risk or a pandemic risk is now in your city or in your facility, you may want to now switch from a neutral floor cleaner with finish or to a neutral disinfectant cleaner for the floors with finish, or something other when there's that heightened concern because of a pandemic or communal impact. The other thing that to consider is that what I find is that most people do not clean out and disinfect buckets, mops, and the reservoir tanks of auto scrubbers properly or frequently enough. And also the drain. So there's a benefit of it is I'm now start using it at that recovery tank. It's just one other, maybe a smaller step that's going to assist in the cleaning or disinfecting of the reservoir tanks. And when you take the solution and dump it into your slop sink or into your floor drain, it will help, because you really want to control the pathogens So you're not polluting, you want to be cleaning, which then typically means you need to clean your equipment, let it be auto scrubber, wheels and pad assemblies and pads themselves. And it could be disinfecting them as well as mops and buckets, et cetera. And the other thing to do is to make sure that you are then, if you are switching, do I need to be neutral or not? And does it have the stated pathogen kill claim? So if that pathogen, if it be COVID or norovirus, whatever it is, make sure that the disinfectant or cleaner disinfectant you've selected has that kill claim on there. And also, again, not all neutral disinfectant cleaners clean the same. So you'd want to make sure that it's tested on your facility.
Mhm. Russ, anything additional or?
Yeah, just one point, and that is Mike mentioned indoor air quality. There's a lot of things the customer, the marketplace wants. Okay, manufacturers of cleaning chemicals generally are meeting the needs of the marketplace. And a study we did a number of years ago revealed that most people, most household, people that are cleaning their floors in their homes want two things as the benefit from their cleaning product. One is that it leaves a shiny appearance, and secondly, that it leaves a fragrance. They can walk into their house and smell that the floor was clean. And by the way, most manufacturers provide those two benefits. The problem you have is, as far as indoor air quality and green, neutral, you don't really get into trouble if you don't use those products. In other words, this is a matter, Jeff, of the carrot and the stick. If you want to make floors clean and you want to make the customer happy, that's one thing. But the stick is that you might get yourself in a lawsuit, and that's where I really think this subject really gains traction. No pun intended, is on the litigation side, because if you don't create a clean floor, you're probably not going to get sued for that. Or if you're not participating or maintaining a high level of indoor air quality, you're probably not going to find yourself in litigation. But I'll guarantee you're going to find yourself in a courtroom real fast when there's a slip and fall, especially a serious injury. And so this is a matter of defense versus offense, Jeff. If you want to keep yourself out of the courtroom, if you want to stay away from a litigation, you got to practice defensive business techniques. And that means make sure you're doing as much as you can to prevent floors from being slippery. All the other factors, although important, are secondary in terms of litigation. It doesn't mean they're not important, Jeff. It just means it's a different form of risk.
All right, thanks, Russ. This one is probably back to you, Russ. What is the impact of a shiny floor in the event of a slip and fall event? Of course, we've done recordings on this, but shiny floor, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a big problem. It's a number of years ago, probably 20, 30 years ago, the wet look floor finish became very, very popular. A lot of the big box retailers were producing polishes, finishes that had the wet look, and they were used on VCT, terrazzo, et cetera. And again, very attractive. The consumer likes shiny floors. Why? Because shiny means clean. Not that it really does. Mike can speak to that. There's many, many shiny floors that are filthy in terms of cleanliness, but it gives the illusion, the appearance of cleanliness. The problem you have is you can't really see water, which is the most likely hazard on a retail floor, for example, or any floor that's using a high gloss level finish, the wet look finish. It's hard to see moisture, water, especially a little spot on a high gloss, highly reflective surface. It becomes compounded when the surface of the floor is bright, like white tile with bright overhead lights. So what happens is somebody's walking across the surface, they don't see the water on the wet look floor, and they slip and fall and become injured. And so that's one of the big downsides of the wet look floors: safety, the ability to actually observe and see if there's a hazardous condition, which becomes very difficult if the floor is really highly reflective.
Right. Well, we're approaching 1 o'clock. Mike, anything to add to that?
Nothing.
Okay. You know what? Let's ask one more question, because I think you'll expand on this a little bit before we end our webinar today. So you both have provided some great information. Obviously, the recording will be valuable to many as it gets passed around. When you think about everything you talked about, what's the one most important thing that you shared today? Mike, let's start with you on that. Most important topic or point.
Thank you. And I can't really pin it down. So there's one. There's a lot of things to contribute to a good, clean, healthy, and safe floor care program. And Russ mentioned a lot. I've mentioned a lot. There's not just one thing, but the most important thing is an effective floor care program on cleanliness, health, and safety will save huge dollars over the years. Let it be the litigation that Russ talked about. Let it be stretching out the interval time between scrub and recoats, or our full strip programs out there. Some of the more important ones that come to mind is, the effective entrance matting system. All doors, all facilities, all year round. 2 is a selection of your cleaning products. Make sure they are effective cleaners and do not leave a residue, etc. 3 is, as Russ talked about, you want to verify. So if it's verifying by ATP meter readings on pathogens to try to indicate levels of cleanliness, you want to do the same thing on your slipperiness, and that record, monitor it, review it, and then use it for benchmarking, that you're constantly driving improvements. Those would be probably the 3 more important ones for me.
All right. So Mike went from 1 to 3. That's okay. Russ, what do you say?
I would sum it up as elevate your floor care program to a floor safety program. It's about elevating floor care to floor safety. And Mike and I spoke a lot about ways to do that. But if you get engaged, get off the sideline, become part of the game, be a part of the process, and knowing what's going on, measuring what's taking place, keeping records. That's your best way of keeping floors clean and safe. And I guess I would add a second part to that. Since Mike had 3, I'll have 2. There are standards today. 10, 15 years ago, there were no walkway safety standards. It was the wild, wild west. Today, there are many, many standards. I expressed one. The NFSI has published, I think, 10 or 11 various standards. So educate yourself. Go to the website. Take the lessons that Mike and I were sharing with you today and incorporate them into your business. It's not complex. It's not hard, but you have to show commitment. You have to be, part of the process. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. It's not going to get better on its own. So educate yourself and elevate your floor care program to a floor safety program.
Well, great words of advice. Appreciate that. Russ, I'm still waiting for my tribometer to get here so I could test my kitchen floor. Where is it?
I'll take one too, Russ.
You want one too, Mike?
Of course. Russ is giving away. Why not?
I heard NFSI just gives those away to good people.
We actually don't have any direct involvement in the tribometers. Manufacturers, there's several of them out there, and the viewers of this webinar can go to the NFSI website and see the approved tribometers. I think there's 4 or 5 of them. They're portable. They come in different cost structures. But we don't really get involved in selling them. We don't market them. We don't really. We're not a commercial enterprise. But we want those who are interested in testing floors to use devices that are recognized scientifically as being capable of doing what they want and capable of complying with these national standards. That again might just come up one day if you find yourself in a lawsuit.
Well, I think we need 3 tribometers because someone named Mitra on this webinar wants one too. So we'll be waiting, Russ. But listen, seriously, thank you both for your time today. And as we wrap up our webinar, we'll move to our last slide. We want to thank everyone for being here and look forward to future webinars that CMM is going to produce. We have all kinds of topics coming up this year. And again, we thank our sponsors as well. And again, everyone's going to get a copy of this recording. It'll take a couple of days to push it out to you, but you will get a copy, and it'll also be on the CMM website. But thank you everyone for being here.
Bye, everyone.